Hey everyone. Alright, so in truth, I don't have the usual laundry list of problems with this episode that I have had with previous episodes, simply because this one is fairly inoffensive. Mostly just covering the reunion between Arthur and his family, and Arthur getting readjusted to his new to basically his new norm after being separated from them for so long. Maybe that in itself is a bit of a although maybe that in itself is a bit of a frustration point because for me, because where ACAT kind of succeeds with this adaptation is in the episodes and moments where the most mundane shit is happening. But when it comes time to actually step up, they fall completely flat on their face. Although even that, I gotta dock them a few points for with this episode because the whole conversation between Arthur and his parents when they reunite for the first time was an exercise for me to see if I could notice any slight change in their characters' facial expressions and animation. Sadly, there was none. Where the but where this especially fell where this episode especially fell flat for me was the moment that his parents find out Arthur's mana core was light red. Like in the webcomic, Ray practically had a JoJo level shock face, but here not so much. Like they drastically reduced down like any sort of detail, which again, not surprising at this point, but still, like I expected some men. I go into these episodes expecting some manner of slight improvement, some manner that they're gonna show some small effort, but yeah. With that said, the episode does introduce us to a couple of new characters, mainly those of the Helstia family, Vincent, Tabitha, and their daughter Lilia. And I was holding off talking about this until we got to this point, but the webcomic kind of introduces Lilia, I think a little bit earlier on in the story. Uh, a little earlier on in the story, but it's when you see Arthur traveling by carriage with Alice, but with the anime, and happens in the webcomic, but in the anime, this is like her very first official introduction, basically. So it's like not a huge deal, but it's one of those small little connective breadcrumbs the anime cut out on. Yeah, and I'm surprised. I wonder why they did that exactly. Now, in saying that, there was one key bit of dialogue cut from this episode during Arthur and Ray's sparring match, which is that when Arthur manifests lightning, in the webcomic, Vincent comments that Arthur's a deviant, a mage who can access a higher level of elemental magic from basically whatever base element he's mastered. In this case, Arthur was able to transform his fire element into lightning. And yeah, I'm a little curious why they. Like, I know it's a small part, but I'm curious why they cut that part out. The only reason I can think is they're planning to rework the reveal into the moment when Arthur takes his magic exam for the first time, because that's when there is a bigger shock value to it in the sense of having a wider audience like paying attention to Arthur. So, which yeah, this episode does set up Arthur will be enrolling in Zyros Academy at some point in the future, the well-known magic school. So we're headed full steam ahead into the school arc, and the thing is, any other circumstances that other circumstances than the one the show is currently facing, I would be gassing up what's to come with this arc, because this Zyros Academy arc is where the series really showed it's basically got fangs, some real sharp ones. And while we'll still get that to some extent, the overall impact of the arc is definitely going to be lessened, and my expectations are not that high because of what I've seen so far. So it's like the Zyros Academy arc is something to look forward to, but unfortunately, it's all about tempering expectations at this point. Um, with that said, there is one little switch up I kind of liked, but they still fumbled with, which is the scene of Arthur's parents basically saying goodnight, tucking him into bed, that kind of thing. Now, and it's a very nice scene showing that even after all this time apart, they're still they're still a family. Like the connections, they like Arthur's Arthur still is Arthur still is their little boy even after all these years. And now in the webcomic, that scene happens before Arthur gets dragged along, but by Lilia on her shenanigans and whatnot. But in the anime, it's a bit of reverse. It's a bit of reverse where Lilia drags Arthur along with her shenanigans first, and then we cut to then we get the scene of and then we get the scene of him talking with Arthur and his parents, and him lying in bed and whatnot. Now, obviously, I wish they could have saved that scene between Arthur and his parents for basically the whole ending of the episode, but I do still like the switch up, and I do like the scene just for, again, how intimate it does feel. Like, for all the problems I have with the anime, this one scene they handled fairly well. In saying that, the scene did have one major flaw, and it's one I've brought up many times already, which is mood and lighting. If ACAT would just learn to set a scene better, give it a touch more atmosphere, I could actually forgive some of the animation errors and whatnot, but the fact that they're also flubbing up the artistic side as well is worse to me. Like, I know people gave MHA a lot of shit for only having having things like happen during like the daytime and whatnot, and just not really changing up the scenery in the anime. But and in some ways, I think I understand where those people are coming from now, having to review this series. But this to me is worse than that in every measure. And for those asking why I'm getting so up in arms and nitpicky about these little details, all I will say is just read the webcomic. Like, you'll understand why these little details matter so much. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Blue Sky, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to push the subscribe button, and just share the video, guys. Dark Knight Anime signing off. Later, everyone.